call tonight. The European Green Deal.
At the heart of it is our commitment to becoming the world's first climate-neutral continent.
The incoming European Commission President outlines her plans to cut Europe's carbon emissions. Key to that will be convincing Eastern Europe, most notably Poland and its coal industry. Fearing job losses and an economic slowdown, we're going to ask, do we go green at any costs? Meet Margaritis Skinas. He's the European Commissioner for, quote, protecting our European way of life. A role which will see him steer the bloc's policy on migration, as well as security and education. Critics have slammed the move, with the MEP Guy Verhofstadt urging the Commission to, quote, stay away from Orban's rhetoric. With his rebranded job title, does the European way of life need protecting? And the Irish backstop, the sticking point in the Brexit negotiations. Speculation is mounting that a Northern Ireland-only backstop could be the answer. Meanwhile, in Northern Ireland, Irish nationalists clashed with police as an explosive device is diffused in Londonderry. There are fears that a no-deal Brexit could exacerbate sectarian tensions along the border. The former Irish leader, Bertie Ahern.
Will it create security tensions on the border? Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Where will that end? God knows.
So we're asking, are you worried about a return to the Troubles? Get involved, Europe, and have your say. Do we go green at any cost? Does the European way of life need protecting? And are you worried about a return to the Troubles? This is your call. So quite a lot to get through tonight, and joining us to do precisely just that, two esteemed guests for us. First up, Alberto Alemano, who is a political commentator and law professor. Alberto, what are you most excited about tonight, or what do you feel passionate about?
Well, I feel passionate about this new cycle, this new political cycle. We have a team that has to be presented to all European citizens. We have the Parliament. In the next few weeks, they're going to be deciding whether they are the right individuals to deliver on this policy agenda. So it's an exciting time.
And we're going to be picking up on whether one of the titles about protecting European identity is the right one, or does it sound a bit like something you'd hear from North Korea?
Indeed. And also joining us tonight here in the European Parliament, we have the Greek MEP from the European People's Party, Anna Michelle Asimakopoulos. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Your call. And what about you? What of our three topics there do you like and you hope people will call in about tonight?
All of them. It's just so important that people are involved in everything, especially now, because this is a new beginning. So, new beginning, new cycle. Lots
and you're,
of comments.
Course, a new MEP?
And I'm a new MEP, so
fresh faces.
I'm ready for whatever comes.
Whatever's coming your way.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, our lines are open.
That's either a warning or an invitation. I'm not entirely sure which one, but get involved.
Indeed, and you'll be getting to know Anna Michelle throughout the programme. So our lines are officially now open. They will stay so for about 45 minutes, so don't be shy. Get on the phone. Our number is 800 333 37002. Our team are down in another part of the European Parliament waiting for your call. Now, you can also email us. Our email address is rawpolitics@euronews.com, or you can, of course, tweet using that hashtag rawpolitics. And we're streaming, of course, as usual, live tonight on Facebook. So a big hello and shout out to all our viewers there. We look forward to going through your comments there as well and alluding to them throughout the show.
It's free, so pick up that phone. No reason not to. But before we do all of that, before we hear from them and indeed from you, let's cross over to Euronews headquarters and to Isabel, who's got the very latest news headlines this hour. Good evening, Isabel.
Good evening. I can see you're in a combative mode, Darren, tonight. Well, hello to you both, Darren and Maeve. Well, these are our top stories. Well, the Italian Prime Minister has called on the EU to impose financial penalties on countries who don't take in their fair share of migrants coming to Europe. Speaking on his first trip to Brussels since forming a new coalition government, Giuseppe Conte said all European nations must show solidarity on migration or pay a big price. Conte also called for budgetary flexibility within the Eurozone, saying Italy needs to be given the financial space to invest in growth. Scotland's highest court of appeal has ruled that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to suspend Parliament for 5 weeks is unlawful. A panel of 3 judges backed a cross-party group of politicians that challenged the Prime Minister's move. Well, the group argued that the Prime Minister was attempting to stop Parliament from scrutinising his government ahead of Brexit. And hundreds of thousands of Catalan separatists have been filling the streets of Barcelona, celebrating the region's National Day and calling for the release of their jailed leaders. It comes 2 years after Catalonia's banned independence referendum and at a time of a national political crisis in Spain, as the acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez struggles to form a coalition government. And those are our top stories. Back over to you both, Darren and Maeve in Brussels.
Isabel, thank you very much indeed. Combative, never. Thank you for that news bulletin. Full one coming up at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Brussels or Paris time. CEST time, I think it's called. Anyway, what we're going to start with tonight?
We're starting tonight with the topic, of course, of Brexit, which has been one of the biggest news topics here all week. But tonight we're asking you a question that's a little bit more specific. We're asking about the impact that Brexit and all this delay is having on Northern Ireland. And, of course, the talk of the return of the Troubles. It's just popping up every day in the press there. And I believe that's the first topic we really want to...
Yeah, indeed, and this comes after warnings, indeed. I interviewed one of the former Irish Prime Ministers on Monday, Bertie Ahern, who talked about the potential cause of increased tensions in Northern Ireland because of Brexit. And on top of that, we have seen a big spike in violent activity across that province. Many would say, including, it must be said, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, linking it to Brexit. I think we've got some people on the line. We're going to bring them in a second. But let's just start with you. I mean, clearly the European Union's big message on Brexit is that it wants to maintain peace on the island of Ireland. I mean, do you think that almost talking up the possibility of violence makes it kind of almost more likely that actually people need to kind of move away from that language rather than ratcheting it up?
Well, I think there is concern. There is concern that Brexit and the way in which it is unfolding might open up this Pandora's box, which is Ireland at the moment. Unfortunately, Boris Johnson is not really helping these conversations remain somehow controlled. In a way, he's spinning the argument even further by basically not clarifying which is the direction. The direction is to find really an alternative arrangement that may allow this withdrawal agreement and therefore an order rearrangement to happen, or in reality is really pushing and spinning the argument in order to push for elections and try basically to sort it out and to have a big electoral gain. I think is the major responsible for this, and the European Union is certainly losing passions. We know that even in a situation in which the extension will be requested, that's what the UK Parliament has asked Boris Johnson to do, and he's supposed to do it unless an agreement is reached by October 19th. Even in that case, probably we won't have a majority, meaning we won't have a unanimity. Basically, it's the first time ever since the referendum in June 2017 that there is no really a consensus on whether this extension should be given. And I think this is historical in the sense that we can see that Brexit might become one of the hot potatoes on the table of Ursula von der Leyen, even though Ursula will only arrive on November the 1st, meaning the day following the Halloween night that will perhaps prompt a no deal. And therefore Article 50 will be gone, and the new relationship between the EU and the UK will have to be rearranged.
And Anna Michelle, you represent a constituency in Greece. I mean, that's a long way from Ireland, from Northern Ireland. I mean, do people there genuinely care about the peace process in Northern Ireland?
All right, I wouldn't call it a top priority.
Yeah.
Listen, Brexit is like a hysteria now, and so Greeks talk about Brexit if that's what, Now, I hear the argument that this might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think that decoupling the Brexit issue from going back, God forbid, to this kind of situation is, I think, the key. Because the real issue that could provoke that are hard borders. So we have to make sure that no matter what scenario ensues, and I'm not sure anymore what's going to happen.
And of course, the economy being impacted, that's what could
I think there's one thing we can all agree on. We're not entirely sure what's going to happen next.
Exactly.
Indeed. Well,
whatever happens next, I think we have to make sure that we respect this principle that nobody wants any hard borders and that we respect the Good Friday Agreement. I mean, that's the basis for peace, and that basis should not should remain as solid as possible while the Brexit quicksand.
But unless an agreement is going to be found...
let's just pause for a second and bring in our first caller tonight on Raw Politics, Your Call. We have Paul, who's calling us in tonight from Poland. So, Paul, good evening to you, and thank you for your call. So tell us, what do you think? Are you worried about a return to the Troubles in Northern Ireland?
Yes, I'm concerned. I think this I sense there's intransigence from both sides of the discussion in the Brexit issue. I think both sides could do more. I heard your contributor saying that he believes it's all Boris Johnson's fault. I disagree with him on that. I think what will happen if troubles return is that innocent people will be killed, and you'll get politicians blaming each other for the problems that have happened. I'm baffled sometimes. I think about Europe as the most sophisticated place in the world, and it seems to me that the politicians that we have seem incapable of engaging seemingly in some kind of enthusiastic goodwill to try and resolve this problem. It seems to me that the EU is making political capital out of Brexit to frighten the other member states into what it's like outside the club. And I think the EU should be taking a high road and perhaps recognising the problems that Britain is facing and perhaps softening their position somehow.
So
I'm not sure.
OK, I mean, should the EU soften its position? Anna Michelle?
Look, I'm going to try not to take sides, only to focus on the substance, which is, no matter whose fault it is, first of all, you don't want to jeopardize peace. Second of all, you don't want anybody to get hurt. And thirdly, you have to find a solution. So yeah, we have to find a solution. A solution requires compromise. Now, you want to use the term softening, you want to use a different term. A solution requires compromise, but it does require compromise on both sides. Yeah. And also, there has to be respect for, you have to respect what the country wants and what its politicians are telling you, whether you agree with them or not. I might not agree with Boris Johnson, but he represents Great Britain right now. So Europe has to speak with him.
And
it can't be any different.
We're just not seeing any kind of compromise on neither side here. The Brexit negotiators here, they're just sticking to their guns. What they've said from day one is we're just not opening that withdrawal agreement, even though the British negotiators are coming to town saying it flopped 3 times, it didn't get the backing. So, Alberto, is it time for the EU to start compromising?
I would disagree on the framing of the conversation. We're not talking about a negotiation in which there are 2 parties that have to agree on something. Here we see one country that decided to withdraw from the European Union without necessarily knowing what kind of future relationship there would have been with the European Union. This has never been a negotiation. We keep calling it a negotiation, but it's about one country that, by the will of a slight majority of people, decides to withdraw. And as a result of that, the leadership, the political leadership of the United Kingdom, starting from David Cameron at the time, has to decide what to offer and to put on the table in terms of thinking about the future of the UK position in the European Union. So I refuse categorically to accept and to conceptualize this as a negotiation because it has never been a negotiation.
And Michel Barnier is the same. He keeps saying this is not a negotiation. We're just executing a mandate, just fulfilling what the British asked for, as we can see.
People tweeting in at the moment, Paul Mills saying, having served in the army in Northern Ireland, it's very unlikely, he thinks, that it would return to the level of violence they've seen in the past. He says if his customs border was built, it wouldn't involve the police or the army again. It's purely customs. William Wade also tweeting in, saying that the Troubles do return. It will be less influential than it was at the end of the last century. Thankfully, more and more people are growing tired of the polarised existence. Just quickly on this before we go to that caller, there's a poll out today also that says that there's now a majority in Northern Ireland who potentially want to have a united Ireland, who want to leave the UK. Isn't this... And you look at Scotland, growing calls there from Scottish independence nationalists that they want to see an independent Scotland probably still inside the European Union. Could this lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom?
I think this is a possibility. This is a possibility because we are reopening old lines and old, even social and cultural differences that have been somehow pacified over time, but now we are reopening them. And this inevitably is already entering the political conversation in Northern Ireland, in Britain itself, and in the Republic of Ireland, because there are inevitably some actors who might actually capitalize electorally on moving or reopening those particular lines of thinking. So I'm seriously concerned concerned that this might actually occur. And not only Scotland being the major actor who might actually take a stance against England itself, should this possibility of a no deal occur, by trying to rejoin the European Union. This would be an incredible precedent, also legally, to see about a territory that is forced to go out and then trying to come in it. And at the end of the day, what is at stake? Yes, is the future of the United Kingdom.
Well, look, we're talking, of course, tonight about Northern Ireland, and we can cross now to Northern Ireland and speak to our caller, Leslie, to find out what they think. Leslie, are you worried about a return to the Troubles there in Northern Ireland?
Sure, everyone's worried about a return to the Troubles, but I don't think for 1 minute that Brexit and the Troubles are the same thing, or one will help the other or hinder the other. The new IRA or continuity IRA, whatever they want to be known as, their pursuit is a united Ireland through violence, through the bomb and the bullet. And any arm of the state is fair game for them. So I don't think that Brexit matters to them, whether it happens or doesn't happen. They will continue on their path.
But Leslie, that is not what the Police Service of Northern Ireland say. The Police Service of Northern Ireland say that because there's no government instalment, there's no Northern Irish government, and because of Brexit, that has helped create the environment in which we're seeing increased attacks. So the police are essentially saying Brexit is a factor in the increase in violence that we've seen in recent months. And they should know.
Well, that increase in violence was already starting to build up before there was a referendum, and it's just continuing on its path. So the fact that Brexit is happening is incidental to the path of violence.
And I get the impression that I'm going to work in the assumption that you might be unionist and you want Northern Ireland to stay within the UK. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I would certainly want Northern Ireland to stay within the UK.
So what do you think of this poll that's come out today that says that 51% of people there now support a united Ireland, and a majority of them have said that Brexit has made it more likely?
Well, I'm actually on holiday in Tenerife at the moment, so I didn't see that poll. I was just watching your programme and thought I had to respond to it. But actually, the backstop, as they talk about, would be damaging, I think, to the Good Friday Agreement, because you are changing the representation of the people of Northern Ireland. And that is written into the Good Friday Agreement, that cannot happen without the consent of both parties in Northern Ireland, Unionist and Nationalist. And yet, no, that's what would happen under the backstop, that the representation of the people would be changed. Indeed, we would be represented by Brussels and have no say whatsoever in the laws that they would impose on us.
OK, Leslie, I think from County Down, but currently on holiday in Tenerife. Thank you very much for calling in, and enjoy the rest of your holiday. We're quite envious in a very drizzly, wet Brussels today, so enjoy the sun. Just before we go to a break, and we have to pause there, and possibly pause Brexit for at least the programme. And Michelle, just how bored are you and other people of Brexit?
No, look,
or frustrated that it's just, you know, this ongoing narrative that seems to eat up kind of the bandwidth of the European Union.
Okay, look, I had Grexit before Brexit,
yeah.
So, you know, Grexit dragged on for quite some time. So I'm used to long political episodes. Yeah. Grexit is having a good, it had a happy ending, and so I'm hoping for whatever a happy ending means. And clearly, I mean, I don't know if Brexit is Pandora's box, but clearly it's a catalyst, and things are changing, and it's moving things along. Now, the point with a catalyst, you go in a direction, you choose a direction, you press on the brake, you press on the gas, you do whatever you want. I'm just hoping it'll end up in the best possible way, and quite frankly, I'm not sure anybody knows what that means right this moment.
Well, that is true, and as you say, we also all agree, at least, on we don't know what's going to happen next, so do stay tuned for the next couple of months. We'll bring it to you on Euronews at the very least. Right, we're going to take a quick break here on Raw Politics. Your call coming up. We're going to carry on in part this discussion about, are you worried about the return of the Troubles in Northern Ireland given Brexit, but also we want to talk about, does the European way of life need protecting? Is it even a thing? And also, do we go green at any cost? Essentially, are you willing to give up anything or everything if it's good for the environment?
There you go. Our lines will be open for about 25 more minutes, and you can give us a shout on a free phone number. The number is 800 33 37 002, or you can tweet, of course, to us using that hashtag #RawPolitics. But first, as Darren said, we have to take a very short commercial break.
See you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Raw Politics, your call on Tuesday, September 11th. We're asking you tonight, or we're moving on to the topic of essentially, do we go green at any cost? It follows essentially this big announcement yesterday from Ursula von der Leyen, the incoming EU Commission President. The green agenda is going to be apparently at the heart of the EU's agenda for the next 5 years, trying to become carbon neutral over the next couple of decades. But the question is, do we do that at any cost? Does that mean thousands of miners, coal miners in Poland losing their jobs? Does it mean you and I potentially having to give up flights and get on trains to go on holidays? Which I have to say, I'm doing next month.
You're taking the train?
I'm going to Munich to the Oktoberfest festival, and I'm getting the train from Brussels to Munich rather than flying.
Because you feel guilty about flying?
Pat and back. Yeah, a little bit. Also, I hate flying, so that's all. Right.
So you can drink and not drive.
Well, that is also, yeah.
On the way back.
Yeah, you sleep the whole way back to Brussels.
There's more time to drink on the way there. Anna Michelle, we keep talking about this east-west divide. So green agenda's big on, in France and Scandinavia, in Germany and elsewhere. Not so much in Hungary, Poland, or Greece.
Okay, not just east-west, but also political divide, all sorts of divide on something that really should bring us together. First of all, I mean, Europe already has a long-term strategy, and Europe already has targets. And so we're not talking about whether we want this to be done. We've already agreed that this is to be done, and we've already agreed when it should be done, whether we're going to move it a bit forward if we can. So it's not a question of strategy now. It's a question of action. And it's not a question so much of cost as it is, because of course it's going to cost something. It's a question of cost effectiveness, and it's a question of who pays the price. Are we willing to pay higher energy cost? Are we going to move this cost to consumers? Are we going to move it to European businesses whose competitiveness is going to be compromised and have businesses closing? What are we willing to pay, and who's going to pay this price for something that I think we should all agree on we actually want?
And Alberto, do you think this new European Commission of Ursula von der Leyen and Franz Timmermans, if he of course gets the nod here in the Parliament, will start cracking the whip? Because that's essentially what they'll have to do to get member states in line.
Well, expectations are extremely high, and we see there's a clear split, certainly between the West and the East, but is deeper. It's deeper at the political level. When you look at the position of Poland or Hungary or Czech Republic, it's pretty clear that those countries are not going to be facilitating the process. This leads us to see how we can somehow operationalize some of those ideas by providing funding and therefore some forms of help and financial helps that have been already somehow promised or pledged by Ursula von der Leyen itself with this dedicated fund that might somehow transition or allow this transition in order to distribute the cost that will certainly entail. But there's something I think that is important to say that you allude to, Darren, which I think is in the spirit of time to somehow try at the individual and collective level to change and to adapt to a growing awareness that we need to do something about it.
Yeah, but isn't that the fundamental point, that it's all very good for Greta Thunberg, who's from a reasonable middle-class family in Sweden, to get on trains, but if you are a migrant worker, essentially who lives in Estonia and you work in Ireland, I mean, you can't get on a train, first of all, and even if you could, you'd spend your whole weekend to try and see your family on an expensive service that takes hours. Flying is just the only option. So, it's kind of like the individual option, again, like for miners who work down coal pits in Poland, there are options on. They haven't got lots and lots of options.
I agree. No, I follow you. I follow you on this. Absolutely. We cannot shift the blame in a very regressive way to those people who cannot afford it. But at the same time, we don't have to forget that we live in very wealthy and educated societies in which most of the people who travel around, sometimes they travel around just for a very little marginal utility. Do you really need to make an extra trip this week or next weekend, or you can just explore the beautiful land that you have, if you get by train, a local train. So I think we have
around Brussels. There you go.
Beautiful Belgium. Well, I'm planning to go to the coast this weekend. It's going to be quite nice.
First world problems.
Anyway, we've got a caller.
We do indeed. We can cross now to North Wales and have a chat with Eddie, who is calling us in tonight on this topic. So Eddie, thank you so much for getting in touch, and tell us, do you think we should go green at any cost here in Europe?
No, I do not buy the idea that we should go green at all costs.
Why?
Because it's okay to go green, but it has to be gradual, systematic, and well structured over time. As the saying goes, Rome was not built in a day. In UK, where I live, you remember during the time of Margaret Thatcher, she quickly closed all the mines in Wales and keep all the people there out of job. Up to date, the poverty in Wales, the area you have all the mines, is one of the highest in the UK, supported right now by the European Union funding to enable them get by. So if we want to go green, it's fine, but it has to be done in such a way that the jobs and the economy will not suffer. I give you another example. Right now, UK cannot frank the protesters and the campaigners against fracking. But fracking has transformed the economy of the United States without a few years. So now we are not franking, and then we have all these high costs of alternative energy. The other example is one of the panelists there talked about going to Munich sometime by rail. Yeah, if you live in Europe, you have the luxury of going by cheap rail fare. In the UK, rail cost is quite expensive. That's why people cannot leave their cars.
And it doesn't necessarily run on time.
So there are so many examples. So you have to do it gradually without the economy suffering. Otherwise, people will be out of job. You can keep on sourcing its energy from the troubled spots in the Middle East, Africa, Russia, and so on. So
Eddie, can I ask you? Is this a two-way conversation, or can I just ask you one quick question with one quick answer, which is, people would argue we haven't got time, as in global warming is something that is happening potentially. Well, it is happening right now, and it's going to get worse, and we need to act now. We don't have time to wait around.
Yes, I agree with you. But I think technology can be a good way forward. For example, UK could not market in commercial quantities electric cars because there's no infrastructure to charge to recharge your battery. So I don't know about other European countries, and in the US, Tesla had to use its own company personal fund trying to expand the charging points in the US. So before you could go green, the government needs to invest in transforming and encouraging the citizens to move out from the means of energy that will pollute the environment to more friendly source of energy.
Okay, Eddie, thank you so much for calling us in tonight. You got a lot in there, so thank you for all those points.
I know the Welsh have got I've got a reputation for talking about it. I know the Welsh have as well. I think Eddie's fulfilling that
So that was
well
Eddie calling in from North Wales, who will go green, but he wants it to be in a social way. I mean, Frans Timmermans, the man who could be in the position, of course, as a socialist, something the Greens have welcomed. Let's bring in a comment here we have on social media from Paul Mills on this topic. And according to Paul, to go green at any cost is dangerous to economic growth of all modern countries. So that's what Paul thinks. We want to know what you think. So do get in touch.
Can I just one quick question to both of you guys? I mean, have you in the last year genuinely changed something to be a bit more environmentally friendly?
Yes.
I did.
How can you not? How can you not? I mean, but that's the transition. That's the transition that we all have to go through. It's a question of pace.
What was the question about time, though? Because environmentalists would argue we don't really, we need to speed these things up rather than take our time about it.
Right. And people who have one life to live and are out of a job would argue that their life matters, and in their lifetime they have to be taken care of in the transition phase if it affects them more than it affects me or somebody who is in a middle-class family and doesn't have these problems. And somebody who doesn't know whether they, can't take the train or the plane and just needs a job, for example.
For me, the aha moment occurred last year. I had the chance to go into an expedition into the Arctic, and to be there on a boat around this
You're just showing off now.
No, it's not about
I just started not using plastic water bottles,
Can you hold that story?
No, but you didn't let me go. And the major thing I've been doing when coming back was simply to have tangible signs of the manifestations of climate change that you could not see here, but you see there, because the effects there are very visible. So you see the plastics, you see all the fishes, you see why the fishes are dying in such a way. So as soon as you come back, you take this commitment not only to become an ambassador of the blah, 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 but also in acting as a role model when it comes to, having your own bottles and not drinking plastic and not using plastic bottles, and my kids checking on me and also making me accountable to what I pledge. And I think it's important. Social pressure is important.
Well, it does, and it does change things. Right, we're going to pause yet again for a quick commercial break, but we're going to be back in what?
Yeah, in a couple of minutes, but our lines are still open for another 15 minutes. You can call us on 800 333 37002, or of course tweet to us tonight using that hashtag RobPolitics.
And we really want to talk about what the European way of life is and does it need protecting. Join us in a couple of minutes.
See you in a sec.
Welcome back to Raw Politics, your call, live from the European Parliament here in Brussels. One of our producers said, isn't Oktoberfest always in September? It does start in September, but the last weekend is the first weekend of October. Rather confusing, I know. Anyway, we're going to move on. Well,
and for anyone watching in Brussels, there's a fantastic Oktoberfest that takes place here as well annually for those who can't take the train to Munich.
The reason I brought that up, because our producers shouting in the ear telling us to move on, because many people view things like Oktoberfest, like beer festivals, as part of our European way of life. See what I did there? Thank you very much.
No. A bridge.
Yeah, really badly built bridge, but still. And we're asking whether it needs protecting. Now, the reason we're asking this is because one of the top Commission jobs is now about apparently protecting that European way of life. But we're wondering, what is it? And if so, what does it need protecting against?
Yeah, because Darren, his job is not about protecting our right to go to a beer festival, but rather topics like migration, like security, like education, so hence the controversy. Well, let's bring in Anne, our caller, who's calling us tonight from Norfolk. Anne, thank you so much for calling us tonight on Raw Politics, your call. We want to get your take. Does the European way of life need protecting in your eyes?
Well, first of all, I don't quite know what it means, number one. Secondly, I think it's to do with values. I mean, I have friends and relations in Europe, and also I have lots of friends where I live, but our values are completely different. And I think that's what it comes down to, what we believe in. I mean, we're all individuals and we've all got different ideas what it means.
So, Anne, do you think it's a good idea that the European Commission has appointed one person responsible under this umbrella, this idea of protecting the European way of life? Do you think that was a good idea of the Commission or a bad idea?
Well, that I just do not know. To me, it is values. I mean, you just can't concentrate that down to a few things. Because, as I say, we all think differently. You and I, we all think differently. And we all are, the way I live my life is completely different to anybody else's way of life.
Well, that is true, Anne, but I'm sure you and I both love a cup of tea. So that's a good start in some ways.
Yes, I do like my cup of tea.
Good. As do I. And on this point, do you understand what apparently the Commission mean by European way of life?
Well, let me just say this, just to start with, before we discuss the European way of life. I mean, von der Leyen came to Parliament in Strasbourg, and she presented her agenda, and her agenda had headings, and these headings are now the titles of the commissioners. And one of the headings was protecting the European way of life, and it had a description, which is the task description of the commissioner. And nobody commented on the title when she presented it. So now, all of a sudden, we're discussing this title, and we're not discussing, for example, European Green Deal, which is fine, the Green Deal. Why European? Isn't it global? Shouldn't we care about the rest of the planet? Why are we analyzing this? But
because according to Alberto, it's odd and it's also insulting. That's what you put on Twitter yesterday.
Well, so I think it's much problematic. It's much more problematic than what has been described, for the very simple reason when you associate the idea of protecting your lifestyle or your way of life with migration, you're clearly suggesting that you are basically protecting your way of life from migrants and from migration. And I don't think this is necessarily what the Commission wanted to convey. But this shows you something that is happening at a very deeper level. We are institutionalizing the idea that Europe is there to protect people. And that's a very negative and defensive way of building a political agenda. Are we here to defend the status quo, or are we here to advance? And I think there's a inherent tension in the way in which this political agenda has been presented, the way in which it has been semantically characterized, that suggests that at the end of the day, today, if you want to be successful as a political program in a European Commission, you need to embrace the populist language, the language the far right has been using for so long. So there's an ideological meaning in the way in which this choice of words has been made, which is very infelicitous, but is also deeply insulting for those people who believe that we should actually make a case, not only on humanitarian grounds, but also on economic grounds. We need migrants. We need people coming here and settling.
Do you agree with that? I think that's an interpretation. I think it's an interpretation that's colored not with malice aforethought, but colored by what you believe in and what your politics are. What's wrong with the European way of life? I mean, in fact, that's the reason migrants come here, because they like the European way of life. What's wrong with protecting the European way of life? Why is that a bad thing?
But is that, well, what is that, though? The question is...
That's right.
Is that a Manfred Weber, there's a church in every town, village, and
that is the issue. The issue is, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And why can't I say that without insulting somebody? Am I not entitled to want to protect my way of life in Europe as a European citizen?
Yeah, but
why does that mean that migration...
Does a Muslim woman who lives in Paris have the same way of life as a Bavarian beer drinker?
No.
But which one of those is European?
And why is does a Greek woman in a village on the border with Albania have the same way of life with somebody who goes to Oktoberfest? No, but we're all in Europe, and we've all found a way to coexist in Europe, and that is the magic of Europe, and that is what Europe means. So why shouldn't we protect that, and why does that mean that we are being defensive, or that we are being, I don't know, worse things that I've seen tweeted today about that? Why does that mean that?
So
and in any case...
You're arguing that kind of almost the tolerance of different ways of life is the European market.
Exactly. That's what I think. I think that that includes tolerance. And in any case, I think with all these portfolio, with all of them, we'll see if there's results and what it means in practice.
It must also be said, the FT, it literally, actually, while we've been on the reporting, apparently the title is going to be dropped. Von der Leyen has agreed to strip it back because of the MEP's fears about dog whistling language on the far right.
Of course, because all those appointments need to go through the European Parliament here. They need to get the green light.
It's not been confirmed, but anyway, that's what the FT is saying. We're going to take another quick break, our last one. We're going to be back in a couple of minutes. Do call in if you've got a point of view on any of this, and we'll see you in about 90 seconds.
See you then.
Welcome back to Raw Politics, your call. We've been blabbering on for so much. We've got very little time left in the programme, I'm afraid. Only a couple of minutes. And actually, you know what? Since we've got this news that the FT are reporting that this title is not going to be used, I mean, what's your reaction to that? Is it an overreaction already by Ursula von der Leyen to get rid of it, or is it quite sensible?
The important thing is what's done. The important thing is the results. That's what people are going to care about. They're not going to remember what the commissioner's title was or what the heading was in her agenda for Europe. They're going to remember what happens to their lives. That's what politics is ultimately about.
Well, let's see if she can make good on her promises. She did promise a lot yesterday, didn't she?
Lots of pledges. Yeah, I think it was still a bit of an own goal that she made, but she's listening. So she was quick enough to say, well, there are going to be resistance. I have to come up with something more understandable and perhaps more self-explanatory. So that's a good sign.
OK, guys, thank you very, very very much indeed for your time. Much appreciated. Been quite good fun, actually. Quite enjoyed it.
Great topics, yeah. We had really
Anyway,
diverse topics.
Let's
Thank
pause and
you
get
to Boris
tonight's
too.
last words. And we're going to go back actually to one of the topics we were talking at the start about Brexit and the Northern Irish border and the peace process. We're going to give the last word tonight actually to Bertie Ahern, the former Irish Prime Minister, the former Taoiseach, who I interviewed earlier on the week. I asked him, will a no-deal Brexit create security tensions on the border? He said, yes, it will. And then added, where will that end? He said, God knows. So a sign that he is quite apprehensive about what may well happen. Anyway, that is it. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to you for calling in. We're back again tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Have a good night.
See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.